But what kicked me in the teeth was not knowing who I was. I don't even feel like motorcycles are part of my life, or I don't even know what I did before all of this. It was just a couple of months there where I was really, really lost. I was forging this life, and it was almost like someone just took my short term memory away for a little bit.
This is Motovation. I'm Lori Joy Kingwell.
And I'm Chrissy Van. We're two dreamers on two wheels inspired by our community.
And celebrating the voices we're just lucky enough to discover along the ride. So if not already, like, subscribe, follow along, do what you gotta do to not miss an episode. Today's episode's called
Today's guest has lived a life at full throttle, both on and off the track. Jessica Soodeen started her journey as a mechanical design engineer, but when she picked up motorcycle racing as a hobby, it ignited a passion that rerouted everything. She's since torn down barriers in male-dominated industries, coached elite drivers, and led high-performance teams across the globe. But her most powerful lessons didn't come from the pit lane. They came from navigating the emotional terrain of caregiving and loss. Now a keynote speaker, mindset coach, and leadership consultant, Jessica helps others shift gears when life takes an unexpected turn, teaching resilience, empathy, and how to lead with emotional intelligence. So whether you're cornering hard or stuck in the gravel, this episode is a reminder that sometimes your greatest breakthroughs happen when you pull over, recalibrate, and choose a new direction. This is your Motovation. Jessica, we have finally united. So wonderful to have you on the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, it was, the world had to come align.
I actually discovered you through LinkedIn, and there's not many in my sphere that I see where I'm like, yes, a fellow woman rider. Primarily, I don't play in those circles as much in the LinkedIn space. So then I click on your page and I look at all your different credentials and adventures. And I was like, we need to have her on the podcast because you clearly are somebody that believes in reinvention, an unconventional life. And I say that in the best of terms. So from race circuits to corporate boardrooms, if someone met you at a dinner party, how would you introduce yourself? Because I was like, what do I choose?
Yeah, and I have the same issue sometimes. So I usually just choose context. You know, keynote speaking, motorcycle racer, engineer, and it's interesting because if you lead with engineer, there's a lot of preconceived notions that come in. Right. So I do like to talk about my speaking more than anything, just because it's where I shine. It's where I can influence. It's where I can really shift people's lives and actually motivate people.
Well, without question. And that's why we wanted you on here today. But I'm curious, as you mentioned, roots in mechanical engineering. So what first drew you to motorcycle racing itself? Because as I understand, it might be similar to me that it's not something you were born into and hopped on.
No. Not at all. I won motorcycle lessons at a university fundraiser. So it was the Formula SAE team. So the irony is like weaved all the way through it. I was not in the Formula SAE team. I wasn't on the motorcycle teams, anything like this. So when I was in my mid-20s, I won motorcycle lessons and I took my bike to the track back when Race City was opened here in Calgary still. And I took it to the track and kept on doing track days and advanced riding because I realized I don't have a background in bikes. I didn't grow up riding dirt bikes or anything. I need to be as safe as possible. And the best way to do that for me was just doing track days, advanced track schools. And oh my God, Chris, then you just get the bug. Then it's right in there. And all it took was someone to say, you're slow as molasses in January, but you know what? You're really good in traffic. You've got a good head about you, and you could probably get faster quicker because of this level-headedness that you have. So I went home and I ripped out my headlights and I ripped off my signal lights and I started making the bike lighter, and I had no idea what I was doing. And it was lovely. So that's what started my racing. And that was back in 2003.
Lori and I love stories like this. And Lori couldn't join us today. Sadly, she's had a very unexpected family emergency, as to her point of connecting life sometimes. But with yourself, I love that you mentioned that this was not a trajectory you had planned for, but it weaves into your life in all these wild ways. So where did you think you were heading at that time? And at what point do these worlds collide?
So at that time, I was heading to be a mechanical design engineer, which I did. I worked in injection molding. I did military design. I got to drive a tank, which was awesome in Suffield. Telecommunications back when that was a thing. So this was in the late 90s, early 2000s. And it was after I started racing, I started helping other teams. So I just started pulling wrenches for other people. Of course, I've got this mechanical engineering degree, so I'm understanding the physics of what's going on. And it was one of my bosses from an internship job who lent me a book. So it was a motorcycle dynamic book, Tony Foal. I had no idea he was kind of a big deal. And so I just sent him off a little email saying, hey, you do motorcycle dynamics weekend courses. I see your list. You've been all over the world. I don't see Canada on there. What would it take for me to host seminars? And he said, what do I know about marketing and all this kind of stuff, So I hosted and organized seminars for Tony to come in Vancouver and Calgary, did all the marketing for it. I was working full time. I was racing myself. Like, I don't know, I think in your 30s, you're just filled with energy that you can do things that you just can't imagine, So I imported a motorcycle from New Zealand, a little GP bike. I was like the second or third owner. It came with a Japanese manual. So that's all I had with it at the time. This is late 2004. So the internet was not what it is now. YouTube, no.
Yeah, ChatGPT, you weren't able to screenshot and say, please translate and summarize.
Yeah, email me a PDF. No, I had an English manual snail mailed to me. It was lovely. Anyway, so I figured out I'm working in the office all this time. I'm enjoying my mechanical design stuff. It was like, it's one of the most expensive 3D design games, video games that you can use. And I'm doing analysis and, I'm like really deep engineering stuff. And it was super fun. But I thought, well, I'm at the track all the time. Now I'm traveling all over Canada at tracks. I'm going down to the States to do track days. And I thought these two need to be together. So when Tony was here and when he saw the bike that I had imported it was a little two-stroke. You have to change the pistons, you have to change the cranks every certain amount of kilometers. So Tony and I started looking for schools overseas for me, masters and PhDs. I had found a PhD program in Italy. I had looked at getting a scholarship. And then Tony told me about this 1-year master's program in Basque Country, northern Spain. I had heard about the Basques because they have a big history with Newfoundland, which is where my mom was from. And so I said, okay, well, everything else is gone. I'm going to Basque Country. So I sold, burned, donated everything I owned except for my house and booked it off to go do this master's in motorsport race engineering.
Okay, let's unpack that because I love bold reinventions like that, but making that pivotal decision, what gave you the assurance in yourself to be like, yes, I'm ready to pull the trigger on exactly that, burning up the life that is here and saying, I'm going to start this reinvention chapter over here. Do you remember that?
Oh, I very much remember it. And I remember people telling me, like you've been talking about this for so long. And really what got me through was the support of my family. My mom is amazing, was amazing. She passed, but we'll talk about that. And just having that, you can do this. You're not alone and you can do this. Like the world is your oyster. It literally is. And it was just that perspective that gave me the courage because it just made that big thing smaller and made me equal to it. Does that make sense?
It really does. I mean,
yeah.
Building our own self-belief and self-trust can be such a battle sometimes. So many of us, Lori and I talk about it so often, that disconnection we can have from intuition. And the more we abandon ourselves, the harder it is to rebuild and reconstruct that relationship with self. But we often heal that I mean, we have to do the self-work, but we can heal that as well through the care of others. And so
Yes.
having that reflection of someone else saying, I see you and I believe in you to help earn that trust back and then pull the trigger, that makes a lot of sense. And I
Yeah.
love that your mom was able to be that for you. You end up in Europe. You do this 1-year master's, but as I understand, your chapter overseas does not end there.
No, I continued to be a freelance race car engineer and professional Formula driving coach. So I was working in the categories that lead up to F1. So some of the drivers that are in F1, Carlos Sainz tested with us, Alex Albon drove with us. These are all, they were teenagers at the time and moved up, but it was incredible. Like I was able to work with a Spanish team, a German team, these wonderful Swiss team, and travel all over Europe to the best racetracks working there.
I'm curious, and I know inevitably, as a woman in STEM, you're going to get asked this question 50 million times. And unfortunately, it comes up 50 million times because there's always a story there. So, being in a male dominated industry, what barriers did you face? Or perhaps on the flip side of that, what surprised you about being embraced into the world?
It was definitely both. And a lot of people ask about what are the challenges, but also I love that you ask what are the surprises. So the challenges were, of course, credibility. So there I am. I'm all of 155 centimeters, maybe 5'2" on a good day if I've been doing yoga for a long time. So it was challenging to get the credibility to have other people when they hire me for the very first time, they see that I've done a master's, but I took my mechanics in and showed them that I was ripping apart and assembling my own motors in my living room. So, I understand what's going on. I understand their order for things. I think the biggest thing that I did that helped me out was really telling the mechanics, look, I come from a two-wheel world. I'm looking for you for guidance just as much as you for me. And
Mhm.
that collaborative approach really broke down barriers. But there were certain times where I wasn't very liked by the mechanics because they just didn't know me yet. And maybe I was too polite. People thought I was sucking up a bit, so it was really interesting in that sense. But there were many times where I felt very supported. So even physically, very supported. It's like there I am walking around with a couple of tires in my hands, and someone comes up behind me and grabs one and says, here's your clipboard, whatever it is, so there were really nice surprises when you felt not coddled, but supported, real support.
Well, and I think a theme amongst a lot of us too is that we get so hyper independent that sometimes it's hard to receive that support. So being yourself in a place where you're like the collaboration and having that mindset, it's not a weakness to say, yes, let's help and work on this together. But sometimes I think
Yes,
we get twisted in our own brains and work against ourselves to a
absolutely.
degree. I know
Yeah.
that you started the conversation saying, yes, my background is my background, but what lights me up the most is speaking. And that's where I can make the most change. And for those that see video here, I mean, your bookshelf is full, and it's full because it's things that you've contributed to. So I'm wondering where the shift happens, because you are quite literally driving this incredible career path for yourself that would take an exceptional amount of educational grit and hard work to achieve what you achieved. But something obviously was stirring, and there's a catalyst here. So tell me a little bit about the story of where this transition comes into play.
Well, the transition came when I came back to Canada. So I married the truck driver at the race car team where I was doing my master's. And of this is, I'm sure that this is fate. He is a Basque man from a very traditional Basque family. And now he's here driving trucks and doing car hauling, in fact. But it was interesting because when I came back, I went back to corporate. I went back into doing a very little bit of design, but quickly I went into management, and then quickly I went into global roles. So throughout my career coming back into Canada, back here now 12 years, I think. And, I earned a Six Sigma lean expert degree with Honeywell. This was huge because there within that training, you were taught to be a change maker. You are taught to facilitate the hard conversations, look at processes, look at people, and make no mistake, anytime that I was called to go to Czech Republic, to go to the UK, wherever it was, hold conference calls globally as well, and facilitate all these wicked workshops and everything, it all came down to the people. It really did, Chrissy. So as I was going up and up and up, my last full-time job was a VP of engineering. And that was when I realized, like, I need to get my message out to the masses. And fortunately, I've got the personality to be able to speak, deliver workshops. I've got the brains behind it to facilitate things and create something lovely for different organizations or for different teams, even if that's motorsport teams. But that big shift came in that I needed to have a larger audience, that it's easier to work on culture, teamwork, relationships, civility. It's easier to work on that from the outside in.
Mm-hmm. What were you feeling inside? Because sometimes there's just those nudges, because on all accounts, resume wise, you're crushing it. I always joke, because you talk about this energy that took hold in your 30s. And I say this all the time where I'm like, why am I like this? Life would just be easier if I was able to just coast and move through. Things are fine. But you do get that calling. So, I mean, really, what does that feel like in order to recognize that?
Oh, it was super terrifying in some moments. I'm walking around from a very stable, well-paying job. I felt like, or I thought that my husband's trucking company was kind of coming along, and I do some bookkeeping for this as well. And it was interesting to think, I'm pulling the plug. So one of the most important things that I thought was important when I was pulling the plug is to take time. So my husband and I had gone to Basque Country to go visit all the family and the friends that we have over there. But I also took 15 days at the end of it, and I went and hung out with a couple of friends and just wandered around London for a little bit, and that was the connection that I needed to take away that fear, because I had to get back into my power. And again, I had my mom supporting me, and she said, you can do anything. Look at all of this that you've built. And my mom was a nurse, so she didn't come from a corporate background or motorsports backgrounds, but she was just so proud that pride flew over me as in the form of confidence.
I love that. I know that, empathy, resilience are huge themes that you aim to deliver from a corporate side. And now obviously through the extension of paths that you're taking.
Yes.
And we don't gain lessons like that out of thin air. They come out of life challenges. So talk me through what ends up the catalyst for this next level that you dive into.
So this, in August of 2020, we're in the middle of the pandemic. And well, actually back up 2 months, June, I get a call from my mom, and she has a stage 4 multiple tumors, cancer in her body. And this was jarring for me. I was thinking, oh my God, this is my life hero. This is my life coach, my guidance, the person that has your back regardless. And I was just in shock. But a couple of days later, I got, it's during COVID, so we had to get a bunch of paperwork done. I was able to fly out there, and I asked her point blank. I said, well, this seems to be really, really serious, and we're probably going to be looking at caregiving at this point, because her condition was deteriorating. One side of her body was starting to get paralyzed. And I asked her, like, do you want to go to a hospice? Do you want nurses, or what are we going to do here? Would you like me? And she said, you.
At that point, how does your life shift? Because anyone that's had to step up into this role, to your point, you got a call on a random day. We always talk about worry on the podcast, anxious minds, busy minds, overthinking minds. And generally, it's about all these little natters. And it's actually these moments that you can't prepare yourself for. There is no school of life to be like, this is what's going to drop on you when you pick up that phone. So talk to me about this shift, because your role is going full tilt, high power to taking care of not just another soul that you love dearly, but also self simultaneously.
Absolutely. And to be honest, just getting raw about it, I didn't take care of myself so much during those months because I realized that there was such a small amount of time that I was going to have that just didn't even want to go for walks. I didn't even want to leave the house. I went away one time to get groceries, and my lovely Aunt Carol, who was there supporting me, and my mom's partner were horrified when I left. Like,
Oh, that's
what do
tough.
we do if she needs something?
That's
Right.
tough.
And of
That's a
course, when
lot
it's
to
during,
carry.
it is. And when it's during COVID, it's very different because I couldn't have nurses and doctors come
Mm.
all the time. But I told my mom, who was a registered nurse, and she was a psych nurse to start out, which was, I think, my baseline of actually being, more into that emotional intelligence side of things
Yes.
because she was always into that. And then she was a burns nurse. But I told her on many occasions, it's like you prepared me to be able to give you this gift all my life.
Whoa. It's like you prepared me to give you this gift my entire life. That, that's like a goosebump statement. Yeah, I
Sure
feel
is.
them too.
Sure is.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
it was wow. And there were a couple of times where I realized, I've got her life in my hands.
Mm-hmm.
I was doing all the calculations for the medicines, making sure I understood how much she ate with different doses and having really amazing, tender moments. Like morning time was my happiest time, from 6:37 until, a little later into the morning when I'd give her some alone time and stuff. But I wouldn't trade that for a second, even with all the PTSD that came afterwards that I didn't expect, the identity loss that came afterwards. There's so many things that you don't expect that come afterwards. But in that moment, those little natters are gone for the
Mm-hmm.
most part. Now, she would wake up during the middle of the night. I'd have to do a bunch of personal care. And it was very true. There were some times that it would be 4 o'clock in the morning and I'd be crying, sitting on the floor, just crying, realizing what is actually like the weight of what is actually happening. And
Mm-hmm.
then I would be able to get myself into this place of, but you're doing this for her. You're the one who's doing this for
There's like a
your hero.
gratitude note to it.
Yes.
Yeah, that's so
Yes.
beautiful to have that recognition in the thick of it too.
In the thick of it, because that's the only thing that got me up off of the ground. Make your own little decaf, take care of yourself, have a little bit to eat, whatever you can stomach, and then go back and hang out with your mama for as long as you can.
Absolutely. I mean, number one, I'm so sorry to hear. And it sounds like
Thank
you
you.
had been gifted in this life such a beautiful relationship. When you're introduced to the fragility of life through these circumstances, your perspective can never change from there. You've learned
That's
a
right.
life lesson. And it's a horrific life lesson to experience in real time. And to your point, when you're in it, you're in go mode. I mean, your whole body, mind, state, nervous system is in survival mode eventually. So
Yeah.
the loss happens, and you alluded there, all these other things on the back end that you weren't expecting. So what did that look like for you? How did it present?
Well, it presented physically for sure. I had no idea the state of my whole adrenaline system and what have you. And I went to go see my doctor and I said, should we do some hormone tests? Because I'm pretty sure my hormones, everything was just out of whack. But what kicked me in the teeth was not knowing who I was
Mm.
anymore. And I thought, geez, like this woman taught you to be this powerhouse. She was the one who really encouraged you to go for your dreams. Like she's been at, such a big part of my life that I really didn't expect. I was like, well, I don't even feel like motorcycles are part of my life, or I don't even know what I did before all of this. It was just a couple of months there where I was really, really lost. And of course, this is only 1 year after I'd left my VP job. So I was forging this life, and it was almost like someone just took my short term memory away for a little bit,
Mm.
for
I
a
mean,
little bit.
that grief is not a linear process. And this is just going to
No.
speak to so many people. So I want to kind of dig a little bit more into that, because exactly that, you're like, on paper, I have all this evidence of who I am. Like if I'm like, who is Jessica? And then it's all there. It's all lined up for you. But to feel so disconnected from self, I mean, how did you recognize that that was happening? And B, what were the steps that you started to forge to not stay stuck?
Hmm. Hmm. I recognized it because up to that day where I got the phone call, you should have seen my calendar. I was in some joint venture programs. I was starting to do more speaking at the university. I was looking into maybe toying with the idea of doing more education around organization development. All that year, I had learned a lot about emotional intelligence, about emotional regulation. So it was a little ironic as well that I had been training myself to recognize all of this, right?
I love those
So when I looked at
synchronicities.
myself, yeah, it was like it was the worst timing, but maybe it was the perfect timing. And let's be honest, like I was in lockdown.
Mhm.
So it was what I could do to get on some group grief counseling on Zoom. There's not a lot of physical hugs. I'm very lucky that we live in Canada. So we have backyards, and my husband would come home after driving and, we'd be there. But the identity lost looked like literally me being lost. So I couldn't get on the same calls that I was able to get on. When I thought about even doing a little bit of a process map for what are my next steps, I would just be blocked.
Mm.
I would just be blocked. It was like this big pause button was put on me. And it was very interesting. I didn't even have any desire to go into the garage. I'd bought a track motorcycle, not long prior to, but there was zero desire of this. So how I recognized it was anything that lit up my life wasn't lighting up my life. You know,
Mm.
when I was alone, I'd have a couple of glasses of wine at night, and that would turn into half a bottle. And it
Mhm.
wasn't a good way of processing grief either. Right.
Mhm.
So I was very curious in the way that the signs of me losing that identity and some of the post-traumatic stress disorder, so the panic attacks that would happen, little did I know this was probably sprinkled in with a bunch of menopause. So very interesting that some of the menopause things that happen, the brain fog and things like that, are the same as grief.
Right.
So it was really difficult to be able to understand what's what at this time. But at the end of the day, I said, it doesn't matter what's what. What you need to do is move forward because this is not sustainable. And I think that was how I recognized.
So
that it-
it's one thing to
yeah.
ask yourself or tell yourself that and say, this is what we have to do. It's another when your engine, as in your body, is depleted, because at the end of the day, especially if there's hormonal imbalances as a result, plus the toll it
Yes.
takes for emotional processing. I mean, we know it's like having a bunch of Google tabs operating at one time while you're trying to do life. You're not going to run as efficiently, which makes
Yes.
those steps so much harder, even when you realize it. So what becomes the moment, or what were the steps where you're like, I'm going to move forward? What did forward look like?
So forward for me looked like taking time to give myself the grace to fall.
Mm. Taking time to give myself the grace to fall. That speaks to me in a big way. I did that for the first time in my life last year. And I can tell you that my life looks exponentially different this year for the positive. But giving myself the grace to fall, talk me through that. What did that
Yeah.
mean to you?
Number one is physically fall. Lie down on the ground. Be there and be okay with that. Because once you shift your mind that being down doesn't mean that you're down for the count. You just need to accept that there are ups and downs in life. And right now you need to be down.
Mm.
So I physically would lay on the ground every day and think about this. Okay, this is hard, but this is the day that I have to start again. So I started walking every day. And I do this now. It was an interesting thing. It was something that, and I wish I remember who was that told me this. So I work from home. This is a home office, except for when I'm out speaking. I walk around the block to walk to work.
Oh, I love that life hack. I work from home a lot too. I mean, sometimes I use a co-working space, but that is so smart. I don't have my pup
Sure.
anymore, and that used to be the routine. So I love that.
Oh,
I walk myself to work. Yes, that's an
to
excellent
work,
hack.
right? So get out of the routine of whatever it is. And it was routines that we get into that you have to break. So for me, for example, I'm 2 years, 4 months without alcohol, and I love it. It started off with, am I using this for grief? That's not good. Then with the menopause, it really, really exasperates menopause symptoms.
Gotcha.
And even one little glass of wine would make night sweats insane. And that was one of the biggest, healthiest shifts that I did in my life. I have no issue drinking, some bubbly water while we're all cheersing. It doesn't make a difference to me with any sort of social pressures. But it was creating new routines, and those new routines were walking around the block, eating healthier. And I must say, I know a lot of people, I've got a lot of friends who've said to me, I eat my feelings. Well, I do the opposite. I don't eat. And this takes a big toll on your body, and you have to understand that it takes a little bit to get that appetite back, to get your metabolism working again. And with all sort of lady hormone stuff going on, you have to figure out what that looks like. So even using taking care of myself as a very healthy distraction was a great way to get myself off the floor.
Previous to this, you were in this position, getting into the speaker circuit, doing this incredible level of education of what you want to convey from a corporate level. And obviously you're a change maker. So you're going to these destinations. I mean, when I think of keynotes, it's to inspire, it's to invigorate a soul.
Yes.
But then you have this big life experience. And I imagine that the messages you had already existed, but even through the work that's behind you there, another calling surfaces. Talk to me about it.
So I never talked about my mom's journey and my end of life caregiving with her in any of my keynotes previously. And it's only been in the last year and a half, even when I'm doing, so I do workshops at the university within their engineering leadership program. This delights my soul as well. And I'm looking at doing that more nationally, because in Canada, the engineers actually have a great engineering leadership program now where you're learning the relational skills, the soft skills. How do you be a manager and things like this? And I realized one day I was doing a workshop and we were talking about the difference between sympathy and empathy. And we were just talking about the different expressions that we have. If you start a sentence off with at least, maybe you should check yourself for a second. Like, am I really being true with what I want to say? Is there another way I can say it so that it's not placating, right? And all of a sudden, boom, I'm standing and I've got 40 or 50 university students there. And all of a sudden I say, it's like after my mom died. And everyone kind of stopped. And I said, it's like when people said to me, she's in a better place. At least she didn't suffer long. At least it was a few months, not a year. And this was super triggering for me at the time. So even explaining the difference between acute grief and what to say to people started to be part of my talks, started to be a little bit, just a little sprinkle of my talks. And what I really realized is that this is something that I'd been robbing from audiences, because it was such a powerful experience to have your hero's life in your hands and the feelings afterwards, that it was just amazing. So that's when I decided to write about it. And so I've got a chapter in this book, Good Grief. And that writing about it, well, I sent it to my lovely Aunt Carol first, just to make sure. And I think this was an important step for me as well, to make sure that I had protected my mom's dignity.
Mm-hmm.
so that I didn't go too much into any sort of details that were unnecessary, and that I really spoke to the courage, this like cyclical, oh my God, what am I doing? Holy, this is a gong show, to I got this, like all that ups and downs, and how important it was. And really writing that chapter was the first time that I wrote about my mom's death
How
ever.
cathartic was it for you? Like, that's
It
a
was
processing for sure when you're putting words on paper.
Oh, yeah, there was a journal that I'd found in my mom's house. It's still blank. Like
Mm,
I couldn't even journal about it for the first 4 years after she had passed. Like it was
wow.
just not in me. And it was a kickstart. It was really a kickstart of a whole new level of looking at that whole experience. And to be honest, a whole new level of confidence of being able to talk about it.
Well, and also one thing that I love that you shared and you verbalized it as kind of robbing the audience, because I'm curious, you've spoke to so many individuals across the globe. You know what it feels like when just because a
Yeah.
keynote's up there talking, it is an act of giving and receiving. There is an energy in a room. Did you
Yes.
notice any shifts once you decided to add that authentic lived experience narrative into the equation?
Absolutely. And I mean, I'm not one to hide my emotions either. Like if I say there are some days, we're all at different places every day within our own systems. So there are some days that I have to pause after I say when I was caregiving, end of life caregiving for my mom. There are some times where I'm like, you're doing it. You're saying it out loud, like it's a big thing. And the shift in the audience is that, and the benefit of it is that people see me differently. Like all of a sudden, they don't see that person on stage, they see the person, they see my heart because I
Mhm,
am completely opening and being vulnerable about my heart. And it's
mhm.
different. The other book that I was in, and this came out in October, so I'm like just spinning out the collab books, apparently, Echoes of Wisdom. So this one, I talk about my very first motorcycle race where I botched the start. Everyone passes by me. I get lapped twice in the race. And I remember the two guys that did, and I'm like, couldn't you have just like backed off? Come on.
Totally. You're like,
Once,
was that
twice.
necessary?
But it's really interesting because the more vulnerable I am with these moments and shining through, well, I got off the motorcycle. Was it embarrassing? For sure. But it was my very first motorcycle race, blah, blah. And I derived that strength, that courage from it, from the failure or from the mistakes. And so it was really interesting. So when I'm talking about my mom, there's a connection that is just people get it, whether
Mhm.
and it's interesting when people say, I can't imagine. So depending on how the person that says I can't imagine, how they say it, usually they have a quiver in their voice because they can't imagine.
I was going to
You
say that
just
when you
aren't
said
there.
they're seeing my heart and it's open. And immediately when you said that, there will be people in an audience that recognize themselves in your heart too. And
Mhm.
that's power right there. And I mean power
Yeah,
from like a soul level of recognition, that the
absolutely.
humanity of it all, the
The
humanity of it
humanity.
all. Because
Absolutely.
to your point, like it's easy to look at your credentials and they're incredible and you have earned them. And then when you unpack just the level of humanness that we're all navigating beneath titles we see on LinkedIn and left and right, and it can be so easily forgotten. And I feel like when we recognize that, to your point, in the fact that I know that you help level up on a corporate level for so many people, there's a power if we utilize. So many people kind of view EQ stuff sometimes as like the more lowbrow in a career setting for some
Yeah.
reason, where you're kind of like, actually, if we show up our more vulnerable selves, I think what you're able to accomplish is 10 times bigger. So I'm curious, from getting your words on paper and standing in rooms and sharing your words, because there is so much power with what comes out of our mouths and how it
Yeah.
lands. What are the biggest lessons or takeaways that you hope people get from your experience and your ability to be open and share your experience?
Yeah, when we had the Good Grief book launch, there were two people in the audience, a mother and a daughter, and I didn't know they weren't going to show up. I'd met her a couple of times, but her mom was with her, and her dad had just passed. So her mom's partner had just passed the previous week, and it was amazing for me to feel the connections of some of the normal things that I said. But once you name them, and people have experienced this, it hits hard. So one of the things that I said, total mic drop moment, I said, what is it when you walk into a grocery store? You're in acute grief. Everyone's just buying their groceries like normal. Don't they know my world's falling apart? Don't they know that I'm a big mess? Like, I just lost my hero. Like, what are you doing? Just grocery shopping. And oh my goodness, like the mom resonated with this. She had talked to her daughter. So afterwards, I went and I sat with them. She introduced me to her mom and we had a short chat about it. But she said, it's those little things like going to the grocery store, or this or that, that people have to understand. Not only that it's normal for you to go through them, but anyone in front of you might be going through this.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
it speaks a lot to being kind in the world as well. I know they always say, now the saying escapes me, but it's just kind of like the easiest thing we can do is be kind. And it is so true because we don't know. And at the end of the day, I don't really know. I haven't met many humans that haven't had those days they get slammed by something on a random Tuesday. There's that old speech that happened, Wear Sunscreen, that they put to music in the late 90s, early 2000s. And it's a fabulous speech that was done at a university and put to music. And the whole premise is exactly that. Like, you have to understand you can live your life to the best of your ability, thinking that you can plan for every outcome, every pivot. The audacity that we have that we think that is in our control. My goodness.
Yes. Yeah.
It's just not the case, simply. And I so appreciate the fact that you're able to come on here and share the story. I'm going to apologize in advance because something Lori and I do before we share our tool of the day is sing it. And she's not here. So now I have to do it alone. Motivation maintenance. We always just do
sing it with you. Let's do it all together. Motivation maintenance.
Amazing. So our motivation maintenance is essentially a little tool we can put in our toolkit of life from lessons that you have learned on your own. So what can we take with us today, Jessica?
Today, it's all about that kindness and grace. So when you're feeling down, when you're feeling your worst enemy, just remember everyone has those same moments. Give yourself some grace. And instead of waking up with that anxiety and starting your day instantaneously, go take a walk to work.
I love that advice. Do you have a quote to share with us today? Maybe even from your own book.
Oh, this is good. I think it was one of the things that I talked about my mom. Like, when I realized that I had her life in my hand, I realized what a privilege and an honor it was that she trusted me and gave me also the gift of being able to be her end of life caregiver.
It's so beautiful. I'm sure that so many people are going to be reaching out to you from reading your words and having those moments where they say, I needed this. I see myself in this. I see you. So where can people get these books? What are the best ways to connect with you?
So they can get the book on Amazon. Both the books are on Amazon. I'm also very happy, especially for those who are in Calgary, if they're interested in meeting up. My playground, like how you found me, is LinkedIn mainly. So that's Jessica Soodeen, Soodeen. And I've got some interviews posted up on my public YouTube channel. So that's where you can find some interviews with me. And it's a great way to be able to see what it looks like to hire me as a keynote speaker as well.
Fabulous. And I'm going to make sure that all that info is in there for you in the show notes. Jessica, thank you so much for taking the time today. It's so nice to meet you. And one of the things that Lori and I celebrate so much in this community are the volume of women who are willing to come on here and be vulnerable and say it real and say it raw. And to your point, that is where the change making happens, our ability to show up and receive that. So thank you for being so brave in your life to do that for others.
You're so welcome. I just thought about it last week. I was teaching the motorcycle race school here at Rocky Mountain Motorsports, and the same thing, when it comes to motorcycles, because I know that's a passion of both of ours, same thing about being kind to yourself, even when you're going 200K an hour, on a racetrack, not on the street. Yeah. But there's so many life lessons in riding as well. So I'm really looking forward to listening to more of your episodes as well.
Well, thank you so much. And that, my friends, is the Motovation.
You've just listened to the Motovation Podcast with your host, Chrissy Van, and me, Lori Joy Kingwell.
Thanks for joining us along the ride. We've got new episodes dropping every Monday, and we're all about community. So follow us on Instagram at Motovation Podcast and visit our website at themotovation.com.
And in the meantime, tanks full and full throttle.